I wanted to share with you something that Carter wrote. This guy named Carter, he wrote Following Jesus. And this came from pages 119 and 120 of his book. The command came, on your mark, get set, and then the pistol cracked and the race was on. A fine athlete sprang to the lead, and when the race was over, he had broke the state record. Only a few other runners even finished the race. Many dropped out when they saw they could not win. As the field crew was bringing out the hurdles for the next race, one of the judges yelled, "Get those hurdles out of the way. This race is not over. Look." And around the turn came a runner, panting and staggering. The crowd stood in silent disbelief as he made his way over the last 100 yards and literally fell across the finish line, grinding his face into the cinder track. One of the judges ran to the boy, turned him over on his back, took his handkerchief, and wiped the blood from his face. "Son, why didn't you drop out? What are you doing in the mile race anyway?" Between gasps, the boy explained that his school had a good miler who had gotten sick just a few days before. The coach had promised to have a man in every event, and so he had asked the boy to run the mile. "Well, son, why didn't you just drop out when you saw you had lost?" The boy answered, "Judge, they didn't send me here to quit. They didn't send me here to win. They sent me here to run this mile, and I ran it." When we get a calling in life, God doesn't send us out to quit. No matter what it is that we deal with, God didn't send us out to quit. Nor did he send us out to come out to win, to be like, we're not to come out in our calling expecting to be, if it's a church plant, to be a mega church. If it's to help the homeless, to be the biggest homeless ministry. There are people who are called to do that, but he doesn't necessarily call us all to do that. All he wants from us is to finish the race, to finish the marathon. So we're going to look at the end of chapter 21 through the 29th verse of chapter 22, looking about how we are to stick to our calling. So let's get into the word. Open up to Acts chapter 21. We're going to pick up in verse 37, and we're going to look through verse 5 of 22. Then as Paul was about to be led into the barracks, he said to the commander, "May I speak to you?" He replied, "Can you speak Greek? Are you not the Egyptian who some time ago stirred up a rebellion and led the 4,000 assassins out to the wilderness?" We'll take pause here for a minute. What the guard is talking about, because of the uprising of the crowd, he thought Paul was Moses. He thought that Paul was this guy who he's heard about this guy who went into Egypt to lead the Israelites out of Egypt into the promised land. And he heard about how this guy was used by God to be able to bring on curses upon Pharaoh and to the land of Egypt because Pharaoh was being disobedient to God, saying, "Let my people go." He thought that he didn't have a timeline because they had the oral talking about, how they passed on this. The idea was they passed it on through oral speech. They didn't write it down. So as far as he knew, he was Moses. So it kind of confused him when he said, "Can you speak Greek?" He thought if he was Moses, he was going to speak Hebrew. But now what he's saying is, "Wow, you can speak in our language." So he's asking him, "Aren't you this guy who caused all this trouble in Egypt?" So that's what he was referring to. So picking back up in verse 39, but Paul said, "I am a Jew from Tarsus in Cilicia, a citizen of no mean city, and I implore you, permit me to speak to the people." So Paul is telling him that, no, I'm not Moses. I came in when I was born in here in Tarsus. So I have some validity of being here. So let me speak to these guys, because now you know that I can speak to them. I'm able to understand what's going on. Let me speak to them and let them know what's going on. So when he had given him permissions, Paul stood on the stairs and motioned with his hand to the people. And when there was a great silence, he spoke to them in the Hebrew language, saying, "Brethren and fathers, hear my defense before you now." So although Paul could speak in Greek, he knew that in order to get their attention, he needed to speak in a language that they understood. So he spoke in Hebrew. So Paul needed to establish with the guard that, hey, he was not Moses, but now he needs to establish with the people He's part of them as well. Now, am I saying that we need to change languages, we need to learn languages? Well, I'm going to tell you this. If God leads you to speak another language, go learn it. Go learn it. If you have the gift of being able to speak in other languages, use that to your best ability to speak to God, to those people that God puts in front of you. Because sometimes, now, I'm not saying that this is always going to be true, but a lot of times when you're able to speak in somebody's native tongue, they're going to pay attention to what you're going to say, because they're going to realize that, number one, you're somebody who has come from their background and you've been given some sort of revelation from God, so they're going to take pause and hear. But will it be, I'm going to use some examples, that common languages to New Mexico: English, Navajo, Spanish. I can't think of the other native languages, but there's other native languages that are out there. Believe it or not, there's some people who speak Hebrew here. There's people who speak German here. So if you can take the time, if you can speak to their language, you're going to pay attention. Because number one, you're native to their background, or B, you took the time to learn their language so you could speak to them in a way that they can understand. So Paul took the time and he started speaking to them in Hebrew. So starting back up in verse 2, he said, "And when they heard that he spoke to them in the Hebrew language, they kept all the more silent. Then he said, I am indeed a Jew, born in Tarsus of Cilicia, but brought up in this city at the feet of Gamaliel, taught according to the strictness of our father's law, and was zealous toward God as you all are today." So Paul is telling them, hey, I learned under Gamaliel, one of the top teachers. I sat at his feet for years. So I understand, I know what your traditions, I understand why you're confused. So he opened up the door and said, I had the same training you did. I persecuted this way to the death, binding and delivering into prisons both men and women, as also the high priest bears me witness, and all the council of elders, from whom I also received letters to the brethren, and went to Damascus to bring in chains even those who were there to Jerusalem to be punished. So Paul's saying, look, I was zealous like you are. I was a zealot like you were. I went out and I persecuted these same guys who had the same understanding that I have now, and I understand why you're confused. I went out and I went to arrest them. I put some of them to death because I was also trying to squash this. He's going to explain to them that he had a revelation later on a little bit further, but he's establishing, look, I've been there, I understand. What it should tell us is that our passion should reinforce our calling. So we all have different backgrounds. Each and every single one of us have different backgrounds. So let's say there's 20 of us here today, right? If you sit down and talk to 20 of us, even if we grew up in the same household, we would have 20 different backgrounds. We would have 20 different experiences. We would have 20 different ways that we can talk to people and say, you know what, I can relate. You know what? We are not one of us are going to relate 100%, completely understand what each one of us has gone through, but we have some sort of inkling and understanding what each of us have gone through so that we can share and we can bond. And we can use that. And it reinforces the calling that God's giving us. You know what? I think that we all can say that we've gone through times of depression, right? Yes? We all can say that we've gone through times of anger. We all can say that we've gone through times of anxieties. The important thing is that we take those experiences and we share, those of us who are believers, with others who are going through that same time. We can share with others and say, you know what? God doesn't want us to stay there. God doesn't want us to be focused on that. God loves us that He gave us hope. He gave us the ability to look forward and see ahead and say, you know what, we don't have to stay stuck in here. Now, I'm not beating anybody up here right now who's going through those times and saying, you know what, if you're stuck in there, you're wrong. I'm saying that God gives us hope and we can look to that. Each one of those times, the seasons that we go through, each one of us have gone through different periods. I'll tell you, I'll give you an example. when my ex-wife left me, I was in a 3-year season of depression. But during that time, God sent people to talk to me, to encourage me, to lead me back to Him. During that time, during those times of lows, when I got those times of encouragement, I was able to be prepared. My heart was able to be open because I just had enough. I didn't want to go through life that way. I didn't want to go through life on my own accord. That when I finally heard His word open up to me in a way I've never heard it before, I was ready to respond to His call. And His call was, Mark, I want you back in my family. Mark, I'm holding my arms open. I'm not going to hold anything from your past against you. When you come to me and say, please forgive me. Because God will not hold that against us. He won't hold that against us. When we come in and we say, please forgive me, when we say, please make me a new creature, the old is gone. Now, we have memories of the old. It's not for us to sit and stew and hang on to and because I'll tell you right now, if you're holding on to things of the memories of the past that make you feel like you don't mean anything, that's a lie. That's a lie, because as a new creation in Christ, we have hope. The enemy will come in and plant thoughts in our minds to say, you know what? You are an alcoholic, so you're worth nothing. If that was true, guys, I wouldn't be able to be here to share an encouragement with you, to share what Christ has done in my life. I wouldn't be able to share and say, you know what? I once was an alcoholic, but because of what I've gone through and because I've gave my life to Christ, I'm no longer an alcoholic. I've been delivered from that. I'll tell you that the lies of the world will tell you that you have to go to 12-step programs for the rest of your life if you have some sort of addiction. Let me tell you what those 12-step programs of the world do to you. I walked into the rooms of the 12-step programs of the world, and I said, I'm Mark, I'm an alcoholic. I'm Mark, I'm a drug addict. I'm Mark, I'm this. I'm Mark, I'm that. That was an identifier of the things of the past, but it did not allow me to move forward because all I could do was focus on who I was from the past. I didn't look on what I could be after that. So the 12-step programs of the world kind of get you stuck. I'm not saying that they're bad because of the 12-step programs of the world, I was able to find who Christ was, reestablish my relationship. But what I am saying is that if you're stuck in that mindset, you're not going to find the hope. You're doomed to repeat the things of the past. But what I can tell you is this, the 12-step programs of God's world helps us to remember, hey, I'm delivered. Hey, I no longer have to hang on to that. So we can use those experiences. We find that our past reinforces our calling. We find that we can use that to help others out of addictions or out of depression or out of anger or anxieties. It reinforces our calling.